Good. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm sorry that we're starting an hour late. I know it will get a little late for the East Coast people, and we're going to need our best Dharma hats to stick with this, because this isn't intro Buddhism. This is the real stuff. When Buddhism, to me, gets very exciting and very dense, this is the Heart Sutra. And I'm Jeffrey Carr, and this is under the auspices of the Chenrezig Tibetan Buddhist Center in Philadelphia with our spiritual director, Losung Samten. And I was asked, would I be like to try to do a talk via Zoom since I live in California? What came to me was the hardest thing I could possibly talk about. The hardest thing, which is this mysterious concept of emptiness. And it is epitomized in our prayer book by a great sutra called the Heart Sutra. And this is our TBC handbook with a wonderful translation, a wonderful set of prayers. The most profound, I think, and the most difficult being the Heart Sutra. And I also quickly put in a plug, the book that I relied on very heavily for this course. And I got it for this course. I heard about a recent translation of and commentary on the Heart Sutra by Carr Buhnholz. And he is a very well-known translator and commentator on Buddhism. And I love the title, The Heart Attack Sutra. You know, and I'll tell you in a minute why it's called the Heart Attack Sutra. But the other book I'm going to recommend, and it says at the top of your voluminous notes, right at the top, is something I read years ago several times when I was first getting deep into what is this thing called emptiness. They have a slightly different word for it in the Indian tradition. Okay, but what is this thing? And it's Contemplating Reality. It's by Andy Carr. I found it very readable and very accessible, and I am no scholar. If things get too complicated, I go to sleep, tell you the truth. I can't stick with it if it's too complicated. I ordered and bought a brand new book by a friend of the Tibetan Buddhist Center named Barry Curzon. And this looks like a magnificent book by the person called the Second Buddha, Nagarjuna, who's I've taken several classes in Nagarjuna. I have referred to Nagarjuna, and I'm going to be referring to some of his famous logics from the Madhyamaka, ones that were taught to me by one of my many magnificent Buddhist teachers, Jay Littman. Okay? So those are three texts that I suggest we consult. And to begin with, I'm going to first ask all of us, as we always do as Buddhists, and I'm now going to start referring to my notes. First, we've got to create an intention that our study of the Heart Sutra should provide a greater understanding and realization of truth about ourselves, each other, and the world we live in for the greater benefit of all. And I'm absolutely convinced that Dharma study is the best thing we can do for this world and each other, the best thing. Second of all, I'm going to ask that we complete this course of study in the way that the Tibetan Buddhist tradition suggests. First, we listen to the teachings, and I'm going to do my darndest to not have my opinions, but to be teaching Dharma teachings here. So we listen to the teachings. Second stage, we contemplate them. That means really think about it and study it. As I was saying early on, we meditators who go occasionally or every week to our meditation centers, and we have a teacher, and we consider ourselves good practitioners, and we've managed after much effort to establish a daily meditation practice, which is the basis for all further development. You must develop a regular spiritual practice. We often neglect the study issue. Too difficult, don't get it, don't have the time. It's very important. So we contemplate teachings, we study it, and then we bring these understandings into our practice. The Tibetans have a wonderful phrase for it. They say we develop our view, which means our conceptual understanding. We bring what we think we kind of got a feeling for in our practice, and it helps us know what's going on in our practice. On the cushion, and our practice off the cushion in daily life. What's going on with us? And we gradually change. Our view expands. Okay? Third, through this listening, contemplation, and the incorporation of these teachings into our lives and practice, let us create the aspiration to achieve the great goal, the achievement of Buddhahood, in order to save all sentient beings from suffering. We will do this by taking the Bodhisattva vow. Remember, if you haven't taken the Bodhisattva vow, that's fine. You can take a provisional version of it. It means we're going to be aspiring bodhisattvas. That's the Bodhisattva vow. It may take us 1,000 billion lifetimes. It's okay. We've set intention, the purpose of our life is to save all the beings that are aware, all the aware beings from suffering. So we're going to do this by taking the Bodhisattva's vow. We're going to follow the teachings of the Mahayana. And as aspiring bodhisattvas, we're going to complete the various paths and the bhumis. You don't know what a bhumi is, you'll know pretty soon. On the way to complete enlightenment. Very nice. And fourthly, by our study of the Heart Sutra, may we come to the realization that there actually is no enlightenment. There's no Buddhahood. There's no Buddha nature. There's no goal. There's no path. There's no real achievement. There actually aren't any other beings to save. And there's no realization. May that be our realization. That's why the Heart Sutra is called the Heart Attack Sutra. One of the legends about the Heart Sutra, and I don't want to go off this thing, is that when the Buddha, at the second and the third turnings of the great wheel of Dharma, when he began to propound, expand on, I call it interdependent origination, the notion of emptiness, the notion that all of this is fundamentally a real appearance, not actual. When he began to talk about the notion of emptiness, the various realized arhats, the people who were sitting, in other words, his monks who had practiced the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, they'd done all their samadhis, they'd done the foundations of mindfulness, they had realized absolutely there's no personal self, and they were cool with that. And they felt, good, we got it. They felt, my God. And then suddenly he said, no, you haven't. No, you haven't. And they said, what? We're in nirvana. He said, no, you aren't. You don't get it. And the legend is that they had heart attacks on the spot. He says that some of them just got up and left. Forget it. You're nuts. Or some of them had heart attacks. They said, I can't stand this. No, don't tell me that. Myth, but it's a good story. So what is the Heart Sutra? And I'm going to be working from my notes. It's a summary Cliff Notes version of a much larger set of teachings called the Prajnaparamita Sutras. It's intended as a Cliff Notes version to be recited frequently as a reminder and a teaching aid. Remember, the people reciting the Heart Sutra in theory were familiar with the various teachings in it. And this is an aid memoir, okay, as you recite it, to what is called the middle way teachings of the Mahayana Buddhism. In a nutshell, well, I'm going to stop going. I'm not going to explain to you what I mean by the middle way. The Mahayana teachings are one of the four principal understandings or set of teachings of the Buddhist teachings. The four main dispositions or religious teachings are what the Mahayana people call the Hinayana teachings. I'm going to call them foundational Buddhism. Okay? It's sometimes called the Theravadan, or the forest tradition. They are the foundational teachings of Buddhism. The second one is the Mahayana. The third one is the Vajrayana, which is the principal teachings of Tibetan Buddhism, often called Tantric Buddhism, is the Vajrayana. And finally, the Dzogchen Mahamudra teachings, which are considered the very summit, the most profound and the simplest, most direct path, sometimes called the direct path teachings. Very popular by Lama Suradas and many other people who are now teaching direct path teachings. They're considered the most profound of the Tibetan teachings, the summit. The Vajrayana, by the way, is very much considered part of the Mahayana dispensation. They still have bodhisattvas, they have all the rest of it. Okay? So Prajnaparamita means the perfection of transcendent wisdom in Mahayana Buddhism. Prajnaparamita refers to this perfected way of seeing the nature of reality, as well as a particular body of sutras. Sutras are exchanges or dialogues. They literally, sutra literally means stitching together, putting together like suture. And to the personification of the concept of the bodhisattva, the great mother or womb of all the Buddhas. Prajnaparamita is traditionally depicted as a female, and women love that. I've thought a lot about why females, because women can actually make people. It's astonishing. I've witnessed it. It's freaking amazing. A person comes out of women. It's just like, okay, suitable symbol for the mother who generates all of reality. That's the Prajnaparamita, the goddess Prajnaparamita. The word paramita combines the Sanskrit word prajna with paramita, or perfection. Prajna means wisdom. Prajnaparamita is a central concept in the Mahayana Buddhism and is generally associated with the doctrine of emptiness, sunyata, or the lack of swabhava, or essence. I don't know if I pronounced that right. And the works of the great Indian scholar and sage Nagarjuna. Its practice and understanding are taken to be indispensable elements of the Bodhisattva path. I repeat that. Many people would like to avoid the sutra, Heart Sutra and the Prajnaparamita Sutras. They are indispensable for the Mahayana path. By the way, where did I get all this stuff? I get this stuff from the internet, and rather than try to figure out how to say it myself, I will quote various authors, often without crediting them. I will just take it off either Wikipedia or I take them off. There's various sites that's devoted to Buddhist teachings and terminologies, and I picked one that's clearest to me. So thank you, great mother of all the Buddhas, for providing me all of this information on the internet. Some of it I credit, many of it I don't, but you guys, I assume, work the same way. As soon as you're trying to understand something or even spell it, you just look it up. That's what I do. So who is Nagarjuna? He's widely considered one of the most important Buddhist philosophers. He's often referred to as the second Buddha. It's that important. Between you and me, he is the Mahayana. He's Nagarjuna. Along with his disciple, Aradevi, he's considered to be the founder of the Madhyamaka school of Mahayana Buddhism. More about Madhyamaka later on. Nagarjuna is credited with developing the philosophy of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, and in some sources, with having revealed these scriptures in the world. Having recovered them, I love this, from the Nagas. What are Nagas? They're water spirits. When you see the little illustrations of Buddhism, you'll see little sea serpents with little people on the top of them. I think of them as sea serpents, from the Nagas who had hidden them. He was also the head for a long time of Nalanda, the famous Indian Buddhist monastery and university. When was this? This was almost 1,000 years after the death of the historic Buddha. Big period of time before this more elaborated version of the Mahayana was formulated in India, when it was, that time was largely a Buddhist country. Okay? The Prajnaparamita Sutras are said to be a collection of about 40 texts. And they were composed somewhere in the Sudnian subcontinent between somewhere 100 BC and 8600. That's a big period of time. Some Prajnaparamita Sutras are thought to be the earliest Mahayana Sutras. And one of the important features of the Prajnaparamita Sutras is the Anutpada. And if Susan, if she were on here, she would help me pronounce that one. But it means no unborn or no origin. Okay, which is a term I love, the unborn. It occurs through Buddhist literature. It means literally what we're talking about here, no beginning, no end. Unborn or emptiness. So the Heart Sutra is part of that Prajnaparamita Sutras, which occurred during the second turning of the Wheel of Dharma. It's the Perfection of Insight Sutras. There are many versions. It's a gigantic body of philosophical literature. Some are very long, and if I read somewhere, there's 21,000 pages in the Tibetan version of it. And this book, A Heart Attack, Carl says that the shortest version is just one letter, A. And what is that about? I've learned it from one of my Dzogchen teachers, that in meditation, you simply, is mantra, and you actually, well, I'm going to go off in the weeds, but that can be a meditation focus. It's a bija mantra. The sutras deconstruct and they deny all the ideas and conceptual understandings, beliefs, thinking, and conventions of knowing, perception, and emotional reactivity. Be warned, that's what they're designed to do. I'll repeat that. They are to deconstruct. That means take it apart, look at all the little pieces, and figure out there's nothing there. Deconstruct and deny. The Prajnaparamitas are actually a not too subtle argument against taking the foundation teachings literally. They are to deny all of your ideas and conceptual understandings, your beliefs, your thinking and conventions of knowing, perception, and what you're turned on by or annoyed with, your emotional reactivity, whatever get you going. It's designed to decommission that. Helpful to compare to the Diamond Sutra, which I haven't read for many years. And I reread the Diamond Sutra carefully this time. It's a diamond. It's fantastic. It's like the Heart Sutra, another dialogue. But it's well worth if you got the time. I read the version by Red Pine and several other versions. It's an essential teaching also from the Prajnaparamita Sutras. It can be thought of as a contemplation manual to deconstruct and destroy all of our illusions and our ignorance. It deliberately and systematically negates and destroys everything we know and believe in. Sounds pretty negative. That's why it's scary. It is. The Heart Sutra is scary, including the core teachings of Buddhism. It's presented as a recounting. That's why it starts out, thus I have heard. So it is the recounting, the remembered discourse. It's a recording, thus I have heard, of a particular dialogue that took place at Vulture Flock. Sometimes it's called Vulture Peak, but I read it's also translated as the Flock of Vultures. Vulture Flock Mountain, in the company of the Buddha, his senior disciples, and a large gathering of the ordained and the novice monks, arhats, which are the disciples who had achieved nirvana, bodhisattvas, a different category, that's a Mahayana designation. We'll talk more about what a bodhisattva is in a while, and yogis, which are practitioners of spiritual disciplines, as well as there were supposedly lots of supernatural beings. To list the place, the setting of those in attendance and the dialogue format is traditional in Buddhist and Indian sutras. The two principal speakers in the Heart Sutra are Avalokiteshvara and Shariputra, senior disciples of the Buddha. Avalokiteshvara is considered to be the personification of compassion of all the Buddhists. So as the main speaker, he represents the compassion that is the heart of emptiness. He represents the union of compassion and emptiness. You know from your study of TBC, bodhicitta has the absolute and the relative component. Both are two versions of the same thing. The absolute bodhicitta is emptiness, interdependent causation. The sutras unfold from the question that Sariputra asked Avalokiteshvara about how a son or daughter, they added that in the old days, usually it was just sons, of a noble family, we'll talk about what a noble family is, go about practicing what is called the profound Prajnaparamita. But right now, what is this profound Prajnaparamita? And that's what the sutra is about. Ultimately, that's the whole Mahayana path. What is the profound Prajnaparamita? So, first of all, it's all about something very personal. It's about experience. It's literally about the way we exist as people. It isn't just theory. This is very important. It's actual life. It's extremely practical. And our life is entirely, this is the reason, because our life is entirely subjective and personal. It is us. As we meditate and contemplate the meanings of the Heart Sutra in our practice and in our conceptual understanding of it, we become increasingly aware that there really is no way we can actually grasp an outside world. We'll spend a long time talking about this. Assuming as we do that such a thing exists. One reason, you guys have all thought about this, we can never step outside of our experience, which is our mind. That's what I'm defining as the mind, is our experiences. We can never be outside of that. We see all we ever have, all that we ever have had, is our personal, subjective experience. But the more we examine our experience, the less real and substantial it seems. The Prajnaparamita is all about the basic groundlessness of our experience. I'm going to be talking a great deal about this, right, and the implications of it. The mind is that which is experiencing. In fact, I'm going to put it this way: the mind is experience. That's what awareness is. If awareness is an experience, how are you going to be aware of awareness? Awareness is an experience of awareness. And we only have the mind. We only have our experience. I'll talk more about that. So what is the mind? And what do we experience? That's what the Heart Sutra is all about. The Prajnaparamita Sutras are all about sunyata, that big word, which is usually translated as emptiness. But emptiness doesn't mean non-existence. This is why it's called the middle way between extremes. I love the Buddhists have a crazy way of referring to non-existence. They say, it's the face of the child of a barren woman. That's something which has no existence. The face of the child of a barren woman. In other words, a woman who's never actually given birth. That's how they describe a non-existent. So emptiness is about the nowness of all experience. And later on, I'm going to deconstruct nowness. So, you'll get your meditation students say, it's all happening in the now. Well, how do they know that? It's because they think there's a past and a future. There isn't any past and future. Well, going on the weeds. Stick to this. Emptiness is about the nowness or the rawness of all experience. I like that better. The rawness, the directness, the vividness of all experience. Sunyata. Sunya is empty, but it also, in Indian culture, it means zero. But the zero in India is a circle of sunya, or fullness, completeness, or wholeness. As my Guru Rajananda Yogi once put it years ago, he said, in the West, we think zero means nothing. But think about zero. If you put a 1 in front of it, it's not zero. If you put 1,000 ones in front of it, it's not zero. If you put a whole bunch of other zeros in front of the zero with a 1 at the beginning of it, it can mean a trillion. It isn't a nothing. So Nagarjuna, who I mentioned several times before, is the second Buddha. And he's considered to have completed or amplified the implications of Buddhist teachings, he and his followers, on impermanence, no self, and interdependence. Impermanence and no self, for example, are cardinal of the foundational teachings. He amplified the implications of what that meant. As Nagarjuna put it, it's precisely because everything does not really exist is what allows that everything functions. What do they mean by that? Well, we enjoy flowers, for example. Well, if flowers truly existed, it wouldn't be possible for flowers to grow. You would keep seeing all the various stages of growth of a flower. They'd keep more and more flowers. Yeah, all the dinosaurs would be multiplying and all this stuff. We take it for granted. Everything's in mutation. Dinosaurs, I once said to a class of my spiritual students, we are breathing air, the molecules of which, the energy of which used to be part of dinosaurs. You know this kind of things. We're made out of the material created in stars. Everything mutates. So I'm getting off in the weeds again. What we're just saying right here is that the Nagarjuna put it, is precisely because everything does not really exist is what allows everything functions. Things exist, but they don't exist in the way we think they exist. They exist, but they're not actual or discrete, independent and ongoing things or events or phenomena that are out there as objects of our own subjective experience. This is certainly the way we experience life. But the Heart Sutra is saying us we're ignorant. We're actually mistakenly interpreting experience. That's not actually what's going on. They exist, but they don't exist. And this drives us crazy. Our dualistic minds get stuck in one extreme or the other. What are the two extremes? Well, if you say it doesn't exist, then okay, I don't have to worry about it. No, it appears. Well, if it appears, then it exists. No, it doesn't. The mind goes crazy. What is it? You say it's both or neither. I think that the quantum physicists provide the current model for how there can be no world out there and that we aren't really any separate. We are not experiencing. We are experience. There are no objects and there's no real consciousness apart from our body or our universe. It's all space and emptiness. Everything is interrelated and constantly changing at every moment and yet entirely ungraspable. You can watch some YouTube videos, I certainly have, about quantum entanglement, quantum foam, quantum theory. It's now taken for granted by physicists. And the Dalai Lama himself has said, you know, he approves. Good. It's like Western imagination is finally catching up. The Dalai Lama embraced it. I gave you a little link to a nice little video on YouTube about the Dalai Lama and his, I think he's talking about Western quantum reality. The Buddha is credited with explaining this as dependent or interdependent origination. Reality is an infinite web of causes and conditions. I'm going to find time to talk about some of my understandings of what that means. The Buddha is traditionally said to have fully understood interdependent origination. Hence, he got it. The true nature of the reality of the self and the other, and this was his enlightenment. Interdependent origination. In fact, one of the great Rinpoches, Dudjom or somebody said, really, it's all about interdependent origination. He said all of Dharma. It's all about deeper and deeper understanding of interdependent origination. So he initially, but the Buddha didn't even want to try to teach it to others because they didn't think they were going to get it. The Buddha said, I have found a nectar-like Dharma. It was profound, peaceful, free from any reference point. Underline that. Free from any reference point. It was self-contained. It was complete. It lacked for nothing. He completely got it. One of my favorite sayings from my old guru, what is that, the knowing of which all else is known? Answer, knowing itself. What does it mean to know? Free from any reference points. It's luminous, by which means everything was complete and present. Luminous. And unconditioned. It was not part of causality. Nothing produced it, nothing will end it. It's unconditioned. Whoever I could teach this to would not understand it. Thus, I will just have to stay silent in the middle of the forest. But luckily, as we all know, he did not. He came forth and began to talk, teach successively deep presentations of the view. Those are the famous 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. So where does this all fit into Buddhist teaching? The teachings on interdependent origination and on sunyata are traditionally said to have been taught in the 2nd and 3rd turnings of the wheel of Dharma. Charlotte may not know this, but the rest of you are probably familiar with this 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. It means to teach the Dharma. A Dharma wheel is the teachings of the Buddha, consisting of both scriptures and realization, which eliminate the factor in the mind streams of all beings so as to be the guide that liberates from samsara. And it is also literally the Buddha's omniscience. The Dharma of realization is the reality of purified, this is a big thick way of saying it, the reality of purified phenomenon that are produced by having become familiar with the mind that thoroughly discriminates phenomena. What the heck is that? When you thoroughly discriminate phenomena, it means you completely understand what's going on. When you do that, you have purified phenomenon. Oh, now I understand what's going on. It's phenomenon, whatever's going on, has been purified from your defiled way of understanding it. You have the mind of a Buddha. Then it's all purified. So, the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The first turning, most of you know this, took place at Deer Park at Varanasi, and he taught the 4 Noble Truths, the other elements of the Tripitaka. You guys will all know how to pronounce that. Tripitaka, I can't because the Abhidharma, the Sutra Pittakata, mangling that. Sutta Pitaka, and the Vijnana to an audience of Shavrakas. Those are monastic disciples with the goal of becoming arhats. The Abhidharma is the Buddhist description, the catalog of reality. They describe phenomenon and causality. The Sutra Pittakata is the basic teachings of the 4 Noble Truths, Anicca, Anatta, all those things. And the Dhyana is the rules of monastic order. That's considered the foundational teachings where he set up his monastic institutions. The second turning is said to have taken place at the Vulture Peak Mountain in Bihar, India. The audience at this time is said to have been comprised bodhisattvas and also shavrakas, solitary realizers, and arhats. I'm going to talk about what those categories of beings are because all of you and me too are one of those beings. We fit in one of those categories. They're spiritual aspirations. The teachings were about interdependence, about emptiness, as epitomized later on in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, and on compassion. Ultimately, in this case, the samsaric, do you remember the first turning of the wheel, foundational teachings? What's the cause of all your unhappiness? Is craving. Okay? Oh God, what's the can't think of the word for craving. It causes dukkha, suffering, ill adjustment. It's because you're constantly dissatisfied. The second turning of the wheel, he said, yeah, guys, that's true. But all this is based on ignorance. That's the fundamental problem. Samsaric suffering is based on error, misperception of reality. These 2 elements form ultimately bodhicitta. And that's, I said, that's wisdom and compassion. If you cure if you cure ignorance, you've solved it. I mean, you have to really cure it. All the habits of ignorance that we have, of our misperceiving, of impure phenomena. The third turning of the wheel was a complete revelation that took place in Vaishali and other places, and was also about emptiness and compassion and about Buddha nature. The first sutra source mentions the 3 turnings. This is going to be a little thick. Is the Yogacara, the mind-only school. This sutra affirms that the earlier turnings were incomplete and required interpretation. The Yogacara philosophers are actually extrapolating from what they said were the second turnings of the Buddha. Major ideas that I'm going to talk about later included alaya vidyana, this base level consciousness, and the doctrine of cognition only, which simply means that what we see out there is unenlightened experience, and they're a false superimposition upon the actuality of dualistic, they're false superimpositions upon actuality, dualistic concepts, generated by the mind that prevents direct experience of reality as it truly is. And the three natures, all right, quickly, I want to go a little faster. Imputed reality, dependent reality, and actual reality. The Yogacara school, in my understanding, is often faulted or created because they assume that there was such a thing as a mind essence that was experiencing, all right, dualistic perceptions. It was like the way we saw the world was imperfect. Okay, we didn't see it the way it was. What is reality? Imputed reality is what is said to be out there. Dependent reality is it depends on our mental projections, our beliefs about what's out there, our interpretations of what goes out there. What is actually out there is experiences itself that gets colored by our impure perceptions. The Yogacarya school, as I understand it, is often criticized by insisting there is a fundamental mind essence, which is the substratum of everything. Some Buddhist traditions also consider the Tatthagarbha, which is known as Buddha nature teachings, as part of this turning. Everything is possessed of an essential, the mind is the basis for all sentient beings. The Buddha nature, the basic awareness. But the Yogacarya school is said to make this into a thing, and the later interpretations and the more advanced understanding of that too is also based on causes and conditions. It is dependently original. All right. In Tibetan Buddhism, Buddhist Tantra and its associated scriptures are sometimes also part of the third teachings, and the Madhyamaka, middle way school that Nagarjuna founded, arose from his explanations of these early texts and is included under the second turning. Nagarjuna promoted the classic emphasis on the dependent arising of phenomenon. All right, he clarified that, or he expounded on that from the early texts. It's now the time to go into some of my understanding what dependent origination is. I will do it briefly because we need to do it a couple of times. All right, I keep seeing an apple for some reason, but an apple's interesting because it conjures up an image in your mind without an actual thing. So this is immediate. We look at it, and when sometimes a moment, sometimes instantly, somehow we say cup. What's going on when we say cup? Well, our eye consciousness takes in various shapes, colors, sizes, proportions. Our smell consciousness, you guys can't smell anything. Our hearing consciousness might take in some information. Well, there's certain sounds that it's creating. But basically, it's our visual consciousness. Instantly, as soon as the eye, the retina, and it receives various kinds of photons hitting the retina, that all turns into electricity. The electricity goes to visual parts of the brain. The brain goes into what we call the mind consciousness. The Buddhists call mind consciousness. So we would call its memory, all of its associations. Instantly, all of that happens in a microsecond, and suddenly we see cup. What else? Let's say for a moment that this cup is really there. What is it dependent on? It's dependent on me calling it a cup. It's dependent on all the atoms and molecules coming together to make that cup. It's depending on the white light rays, which reflect into my eyes, which make it into a white cup. It has an inside and an outside. Can the cup have an inside and can the cup be the cup without the inside and outside? No, it can't be the cup anymore. The cup is dependent on being at a certain time and a certain place. It's dependent on the plastic and all the components of plastic. I go on and on and on and on. All of this stuff, you guys all know, have to come together at the same time, at the same place, under similar conditions. The causes and conditions for any phenomenon, this cup, and right now it's changing as I move it. It's constantly in flux. The causes, conditions for all phenomenon, constantly in flux. There is no actual things. All there are constantly changing causes and conditions. Anytime you try to find the plastic of the cup, it's atoms and molecules, whatever they are. What are the atoms and molecules? They're energy. What is the energy? It's light. Everything is composed of other parts. There's no final anything. As my teacher Jay Lipman said, everything is ultimately, and you have to meditate on this a lot, it's simply emanations upon emanations upon emanations upon emanations. It's mirror reflections after mirror reflections. It does no good to say, oh, it's just all in your mind, because where is your mind? Well, it's in my brain. Really? The cup is in my brain? How did the cup get into my brain? It's an idea in your brain. What is that? Well, I don't know. It's some kind of interchange between the nerve cells. What are the nerve cells? Well, they're in your brain. That means if I open up a person's head and go looking for a cup, you can find it? No. Well, then where is the cup? It's there, but you just told me that the cup only occurs in my brain. Yeah, so where is the cup in my brain? I don't know, it's an idea. Why do you keep bugging me? Because I want to know what you think the cup is. I don't know what the cup is. You got it. For a moment, you had prajna. It appears, and yet I don't even know what it is. If you guys would like to spend a good darn afternoon, do that with everything. Do that with Trump. Do that with all your political opinions. Do it with all of your hopes and fears. Do that with your body. Do that with your relationships. You won't find anything there. Everything is simply parts of other things. And those parts, if you pursue them logically, it goes nowhere. It just evaporates under your fingers. It's scary. But it lightens you up. So, the prajna paramita means the perfection of wisdom or the perfection of insight or the transcendent insight. It means having gone to the other shore or having gone beyond. Beyond what? Attachment, fear, desire, belief, opinion, heaviness, lack of humor. It means going beyond the ocean of samsara, which the the Mahayana people define as your ignorance. By the way, I've heard samsara defined as it's just one damn thought after another. It's one experience after another, after another, after another, after another, endlessly. Samsara. Into nirvana. Talk more about nirvana later. But nirvana is not a place. It's not like heaven. And nirvana isn't any other place. If nirvana is any place, it's right here. Whatever here is. There's no heaven, you're going somewhere. Nothing is to be perfected in emptiness itself. You don't have to get better and better and better, and then you get to be empty. You're already empty. The only thing that changes is your insight into that, your prajna, your level of wisdom. It's not based on acquiring information. You can read all you want to about emptiness. You can even meditate all you want on emptiness. Ultimately, it's not something you can achieve. What does it rely on? A basic inquisitive of mind, wanting to know what reality is. And I'll tell you from personal experience, your mind doesn't want you to get this. Your mind will put up a tremendous ruckus about turning in next week and saying, I don't know, Jeff, he just went on and on. I don't want to turn. I don't want to listen to it. Your mind, I guarantee you, will start giving you thoughts like that. For the sake of the Buddha, please tell your mind, I know you're bored and it's hard. It's scary stuff. Stick with it. And I would be very grateful. Buddha would be grateful. Tune in, because this is very important stuff. You cannot develop your compassion unless you really enjoy the the flavor of emptiness. Prajna is the sword of discrimination. What is discrimination? Your ability to tell the differences between things. It's the sword of discrimination. Basically, what is real and unreal, and who and what we are. Okay? And who we are and what we're perceiving. It frees us from ego delusion by making us question the very basis of our identification with ego. I'm trying to get the damn Democrats to be sensible. You know, really question, what are Democrats? Who is me? What is all this? What's really, really, really going on? The very basis of our identification with who and what we think we are, and what we think is important. The Prajnaparamita Sutras describe all kinds of situations where the bodhisattvas get mired down, including to say, well, does that mean you're just advocating not doing anything at all to try to save the world? No, I'm not saying that at all, because that's just another ego delusion. There's nothing to hang on to. Lots more about this. About this, by the way, your mind will start getting upset and angry and impatient. The mind doesn't want to hear this stuff. It's deeply compassionate because it liberates you from the basic problem of your ignorance and all of our ignorance. You're liberating the world from ignorance by studying the Prajnaparamita Sutras. Ignorance means not knowing, but it also means avoiding knowing. And this boy here, I often, when I read difficult materials, I go to sleep. That's just my mind trying to avoid the issue. When you're meditating, all of us meditators know a lot of times sleep is just, something in us is just trying to avoid the issue. It's just avoidance, it's ignorance coming up. Because you'll notice 5 minutes later, you'll be awake again. Dwelling in Prajnaparamita is said to be far superior to any studies, reflections, or other meditations on the Dharma. You're doing your Prajnaparamita emptiness meditations and looking at, you know, what is really going on. You say, you know, I think it's time for me to do some Tara meditations. That's just your mind making trouble for you. Tara wants you to study this stuff. She is this stuff. Emptiness is not about some thing called emptiness. It's about letting go of everything that prevents us from the true nature of our mind. We don't hold on to any agendas at all, especially Dharma agendas. In order to dwell in the natural state of our mind, we have to deconstruct or let go of all of our mental concepts. There's 3 types of insight or prajna. First of all, there's the study that we get, knowledge that we get through study, which is what we're doing right now. There's cutting through and the illumination of delusion. That's suddenly getting it like, oh my God, you know, well, what about Shakti, or what about the Kundalini? Oh, that's just also something I'm just making up out of cause and conditions. That's cutting through delusion or attachment. Cutting through attachments, when you realize, I didn't really need that, or that's just something, some selfish grasping. That's also cutting through attachment, cutting through delusion. Direct insight into the nature of all phenomenon. That means little doses of prajna, little doses of insight that we get as we study this. Their view expands. There's 4 kinds of Prajnaparamita. There's the natural Prajnaparamita is just the non-dual wisdom. It's the same, basically it's Buddha nature. There's the scriptural Prajnaparamita, which is the stuff that we're studying. The path paramita, that's the stuff that you actually practice. And the fruitional Prajnaparamita, that's the insight that we gain from our practice. Buddha's teachings on the Prajnaparamita supposedly were not valued. The book says this. They're trying to explain how come it took 400 years before they showed up again. It said that they weren't valued, nobody got it, so they were kind of undiscovered. Finally, it took Nagarjuna to start figuring it all, reconstructing it again, supposedly from the sea serpents. All right, I'm going to skip some of this stuff. In the commentaries, the emptiness discussed in reason in Nagarjuna's Madhyamaka literature, Madhyamaka people focus specifically on the contemplation of and how to meditate on emptiness. But the other great commentary is by Maitreya. Now, I had only understood Maitreya to be the future Buddha. And I asked a Dharma friend of mine, he said, no, there was an actual philosopher called Maitreya. In any case, there is the commentary called The Ornament of Clear Realization. It condensed all of the Prajnaparamitas. It's basically a Cliff Notes version, another Cliff Notes version of the Prajnaparamita Sutras, all the philosophical discourses, and he made it into a number of verses and commentaries. This guy, Carl, says that they're actually as difficult as the original Prajnaparamita stuff to get, but he is the one that came up with the notions is that you get wisdom by stages. And that is where you get the paths and the bhumis. I'm going to try to stick to the script here. You get the gradual path of the paths of the bhumis that you've heard of. The Indian and Tantric paths are also incorporated in the Prajnaparamita Sutras into the Cho period. In other words, they were absorbed into Tantric philosophy. So how do you study the Prajnaparamita Sutras? You don't want to read all this commentary and you don't want to look at the Heart Sutra anymore. Well, over my altar, I have Nairatma, who is Nyingma goddess. She is described as the headless or the egoless woman. She represents Prajnaparamita wisdom. So when I meditate on her, I'm doing my tantric practice of non-dual reality or emptiness. She's a personification of emptiness. That's the tantric interpretation of bringing in the Prajnaparamita Sutras. Prajnaparamita deliberately presents Buddhist heresy. It attacks and destroys the early Buddhist teachings on the 5 skandhas, the 12 links of dependent causation, 4 noble truths, etc., etc. It attacks the reification, that means the solidification, the strong belief in all of the stuff that's in the Abhidharma. The Abhidharma describes all kinds of various states of mind, categories of experience, how reality unfolds. Prajnaparamita, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, basically says, no, you're making it too real. That's not really what it's about. Abhidharma classifies and reifies all the categories of experiences into rigid categories of things and realities. Now I'm going to give you some basic points, and I'm on page 7 here. Basic points for foundational Buddhism. This is different than the Mahayana Buddhism. Anytime there's discussion of bodhicitta and bodhisattvas, that tends to be the Mahayana. When you talk about nirvana and arhats and personal liberation, that's associated with the foundational teachings, or the Hinayana. The wisdom of the Prajnaparamita Sutras is about emptiness and interdependent arising. That's the Mahayana. But the wisdom of the foundational teachings of no personal self, impermanence, dukkha, and the 4 noble truths are Hinayana, or the foundational teachings. Bodhisattvas aren't concerned about what's going on. They say that's all delusion. But the Abhidharma classifies everything in terms of causality. Okay? In terms of how things arise, how they abide, and how they disappear. The Abhidharma is all about impermanence. Everything arises, abides, disappears. And the mind is not an individual entity, but it's just a collection of constantly shifting karmic processes that they call the skandhas. I'm going to go into great lengths about the skandhas later on. You'll completely get what skandhas are. When we study the categories of the 5 skandhas, the 12 atanas, and the 18 dhatus in detail, whatever those are, I will go into what those are. We have a precise and vast sense of just what phenomenon and so-called reality actually is. That's what the Abhidharma foundational teachings are about. The Prajnaparamita says that there isn't really anything arising. Everything is unborn. There's no ceasings. All phenomena are unborn. Abhidharma describes the multiplicity of phenomenon as reality. Everything is interrelating characteristics, even moments of mind. Also, everything is related causally. The causation. Every moment has a preceding moment that causes it. And this is the cause for the subsequent moment. That's foundational to foundational Buddhism. And the Prajnaparamita says that's not really what occurs. On the contrary, the Prajnaparamita teachings, we can't really find any hard and fast boundaries between events and things. It's all just merely conceptual fabrications. You can imagine that that would really annoy people who had worked out cause and conditions for everything. He said, this is what causes this is what causes that. And I'm not going to go into here, but I could give you some of the Madhyamaka reasonings, the logics, which destroy how we think reality comes about. The message of the foundation teaching is suffering is caused by your desire and attachments with this unreal personal self that's just skandhas. How do you get there? Tanha. Abandon tanha. That's craving. It's all impermanent. Everything arises, persists, and dissipates as causing conditions change. So be detached. Seek non-attachment to all things because they change anyway. Seek instead nirvana, which is the complete extinction of craving. There's a very famous Buddhist quote about the utter extinguishing of craving. But the message of the Prajnaparamita is don't get stuck. Every moment and every detail of experience are ephemeral. They're fleeting things, but there's nothing to them. Experience is just appearances. Emptiness is form. Everything this is there and not there. It's not there in any real way. We're saying, I won't go through the whole deconstruction of it right now. It did the same thing as the cup. How is it? It's just whole bunches of stuff, phenomenon, that every time you look carefully at the phenomenon evaporates. You can't find anything solid there. So be free of ignorance. It's your ignorance that makes you think everything is real. And now finally it says, you want to become a Buddha? You already are Buddha nature. The fact that everything is empty and it appears, including you, that is Buddha nature. That's all there is. Ouch. So the Heart Sutra is one distillation of the Prajnaparamita Sutras. And the philosopher, and sometimes called future Buddha, Maitreya, apparently also created a commentary on the Prajnaparamita Sutras. And it's a famous book which I took a class where I was given a summary of the book. I tried to read it and it was just too much for me. But actually I read 3 pretty detailed summaries of what the book is from Jay Lippman. It's called The Ornament for Clear Realization. I was working by the translation and commentary by my teacher I've taken refuge with, Trungpa Rinpoche. All right, he presents the outline of the paths and the bhumis, which are the ways of the Bodhisattvas. The 5 Buddhist paths. I'm going to go turn on one more light because it's getting hard for me to read this. This is a lot of information. I hope you guys are keeping up with it. The paths, the 5 Buddhist paths. Remember, he's saying, this is how we progress within emptiness. That's, it's an irony. It seems to be a contradiction, but this is what he's saying. He's saying the first one is the path of accumulation, which we're all on. Traditionally, you're said to accumulate wisdom and merit. But they also mean just accumulating your experience as a meditator, as a Buddhist. Doing a course like this has gained you immense merit. Why? Because it's clarified some of your misunderstandings, giving you new perspectives, opened you up a little bit, finally giving you much spiritual benefit. The path of accumulation. The path of preparation is your developing view. Conceptually, you understand a little bit more subtlety and a little bit more subtlety to what this Buddhist thing is all about. When you first started meditating, you just thought it was all about loving kindness. And now you're beginning to think, oh my God, it's about everything, everything. Yes, Buddhism is about everything. The path of seeing, what we're aspiring, that's when you really start getting it. And traditionally, the path of seeing is where the bhumis start. Where are the bhumis? There's 10 of them. I've read description of the bhumis, and because they're too much for me, I don't get a lot of it. It's just flowery language to me because I don't have any correlation in my own experience, in my Dharma bank to understand them. But the path of seeing is where the first bhumi is where you really start getting emptiness and you become a bodhisattva. The path of meditation or familiarization, you know that the Tibetan translation of the word for meditation is gom, or familiarization. Path of meditation is where we develop our experience of reality. And finally, the path of no more learning is where you're there. You gain realization. The goal of these paths and bhumis are to become friends with the basic groundlessness and no path. By the path of no more learning, you realize there really isn't any progressive understanding. It was all perfect to begin with. The goal is one should become a bodhisattva, the knowledge of wisdom for the sake of all beings. The goal is to know that there's no bodhisattvas, no being, no perfection, no obtainment, there's no goal. To accept that there's goals and progress at the same time there really isn't any goals and any progress, those are just conceptual fabrications, that's perfection. That's basically when you get it. Bodhisattva path is increasingly the grasp of these two realities, the seeming and the ultimate. Do you remember the famous quote of the middle way is about relative and ultimate bodhicitta, or the relative and absolute truth? You see both of them are both true. They're two different ways of looking at the same thing. One is a view of confused sentient beings. They see everything in terms of relative reality. The other is non-referential wisdom, mind, that experience directly how things actually are. To see the two worlds at once is the goal of practice, and it's a goalless goal. Let me see if I have time to read you something about Maitreya. I think I might. You guys are very patient. I think I will. I can't believe it. How are you guys holding up? How are you? Are you okay? All right. This is a lot. I looked up who this Maitreya was because I wanted to know more. I'll read this. These works transmitted from Arya, that means great teacher, Arya Maitreya, the fifth and future Buddha of this fortunate age. This is from the preface to the Trungpa Rinpoche version of the translation of the Ornament of Clear Realization. To Arya Asanga, Asanga is another one of these great early Mahasiddhas. Sometime in the 3rd century, comprised one of the major foundations of the Mahayana Buddhism, the unbroken transmission in practice which continues today. These are notes I've added today. They will be in your updated notes that you'll have for next class. I'm going to add more to the notes for next class. The focus of this text is the Prajnaparamita teachings. There are two main ways of approaching the meaning of the Prajnaparamita, the direct and the indirect approach, with both approaches revealing the meaning of emptiness. Many students these days are familiar with the direct approach to understanding emptiness as shown in such texts as those by Nagarjuna. I have about that much familiarity, he's right, with Nagarjuna. However, the indirect approach is perhaps a little less familiar and is what Maitreya is focusing on in his text. The indirect approach to emptiness reveals the hidden meaning of the Prajnaparamita Sutras by examining the 5 paths and the various spiritual levels. Through this approach, one understands how emptiness is realized, how this wisdom is developed, and what is removed by this wisdom, how your ignorance is removed. Maitreya received the full transmission and meaning of these teachings directly from the Buddha. You say, how can that be? Because they weren't alive at the same time. That's just a mere conceptual fabrication. Buddha wisdom is eternal. You're not even saying it's unborn realization. We are Buddha nature. So, of course, he could receive it. He simply was, on a practical level, he was able to directly perceive wisdom. That's Buddha. He's therefore able to convey the meaning clearly and directly for us. This was his main motivation for composing this particular work, and also that by understanding the Prajnaparamita teachings, beings would come to accomplish Buddhahood. One thing this does is it describes states of being. I won't say states of mind, states of being. That if you experience it in your meditation, you're saying, oh, I know what he's talking about. By the way, all of you now, and as your spiritual practice develops, you'll come across things that were formerly completely opaque, and you'll say, oh, no, I understand that. That's perfectly obvious what that means. That's prajna. You develop the capacity and the willingness. Suddenly it's there. That means your view is expanded, your ignorance is diminished. And it happens, trust me, it certainly does. So the middle way presents a union of prajna and skillful means, upaya. Bodhisattvas recognize that samsara is just a dream. But at first, they still experience this dream. The bodhisattvas in training. And occasionally they lose it. They forget that it's a dream. Just because it's like a dream doesn't mean that it isn't real, however. And there's this wonderful Chinese proverb. Listen to this. This is a famous Buddhist Chinese ancestor, in other words, a Buddhist master, wrote in a bathhouse where I guess all the monks and the nuns were taking baths. For some reason, I see this as a woman. If nothing truly exists, you smartass, if nothing truly exists, then what are you bathing? Struggling. Where could even the slightest bit of dust come from? So, even if you see no difference between the water and the dirt, you're totally cool with everything is the same, your empties, but it all still has to be washed away when you come in here. So what are they talking about here? Skillful means. It might be all emptiness. It might just be conceptual fabrication, but that doesn't mean that there isn't such a thing as skillful means, Buddhist practice, ethics, all the rest of it. You say, but that doesn't make it sense. It's got to be, how can it be empty and still be that? That's just your dualistic mind insisting on extremes. The great middle way is they both are true. That's all they can be. It isn't a theory that you have to fit your, oh, I've got to believe in this because I want to be a good Buddhist. No, you have to absolutely realize this, oh my God, now it's perfectly plain. It's as plain as my face. That's what we're after here. For a long time, the practice is to meditate on emptiness, but in post-meditation, you're back in dualistic conceptual mind. I meditate on emptiness every day. I've been doing it for years. That's all I do. That's my practice. I just go into vast space. And I try to drop body and mind. I try to drop anything. Jay Lettman told me this many years ago. He said, just drop everything. Whatever's left, drop everything. Whatever's left, how do you drop everything? You drop it. That was literally shown to me. That was my pointing out instruction. But how do you drop everything? Drop it. How do you drop it? But drop it. Do that in meditation. Drop everything. Over and over and over again. Every conceptual framework, anything that comes up, drop it. Thoughts, drop it. What is that remains? Caution. I've gotten ahead of myself. In Tibetan, the word for meditation, gom, means familiarization. That means with the natural state, which is non-conceptual knowing or rigpa. Don't make the mistake of making Rigpa into something very complicated and difficult that you'll never get there. That is total conceptual bullshit. Drop all the bullshit, and that is Rigpa. A Tibetan master puts it, when cleaning, first put in more dirt or soap on the body, that means the conceptual teachings, then wash away both the stains and the remedy through non-conceptual knowing, or Rigpa. And I also like the Western term, gnosis, or knowingness. The emptiness of emptiness, beyond all views. Nagarjuna said, good warning for this boy. The victors taught, meaning the people, the Buddhas, taught that what are the victors over? Ignorance. The victors taught that emptiness means to eradicate all views. And those who are stuck in emptiness as being a view, there's no hope. If you reify emptiness, I'm meditating. In fact, I was just reifying emptiness a few moments ago when I was bragging about meditating. Nothing to hold on to. Run about or something like that. Drop it. Drop it. The Prajna Paramita is about deconstruction of doing. It's about not doing. It tells us not what to do, but what not to do. We have to train our minds in not doing, which means not grasping. But, stop it. But, stop it. Should I, stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. I got it. Stop it. No, this time stop it. What is that mind like that doesn't need more entertainment, that doesn't need the next thought, that doesn't need to grasp at anything, including grasping after itself? That's every day. I meditate quite a bit. What is that mind? I don't even ask the question. I just, what is it? Just go there. Do your best. We invest so much of our time and our energy in the cultivation of our ego personalities, our possessions, our beliefs, our opinions, our drama, our great stories about me and all of our suffering. As Jay Lippman once told me, he said, God, think about all the time you put into your career. You'd spend all that time in Dharma practice, you wouldn't be having any, you wouldn't be struggling. All that effort we put into our opinions. And finally about the story of me, the little me. The Heart Sutra just tells us to forget about all of that. Just be free. Guess what? It doesn't even matter if you think you get it. It doesn't matter. You don't even have to be a Buddhist. It doesn't matter ultimately. It's just stuff. It's not an easy linear path of gaining more and more experience in Dharma and what do you call it, merit, and achieving goals and gaining more. We have to realize that we're not individual egos or souls. We're sort of like, I use the term karmic holograms. We're just illusions. I use the term sitcoms. We're fictional beings. We're stories that we tell ourselves. And that our illness and our suffering and our experiences are all based just on karma. Whatever that is. It does and it doesn't. It exists. Our habits and addictions are delusion. Right about now, many people say, stop it. You know, this is not helping. This is just your theoretical horseshit. Listen, forget it. What about loving kindness? What about trying to do something for the world? What about His Holiness Dalai Lama? You're telling me to drop it, to forget it, that all of this stuff doesn't matter. You're laughing about it. People are suffering. Right? The mind will go crazy. The Heart Sutra is designed to free us from all of that stuff. You have to be gentle and patient. I've got 15 minutes. There's some guy I love to listen to on the internet. I think he's wonderful. He wrote a wonderful, his name is Jackson Peterson, and he wrote a wonderful book called The Bliss of Being. Can't recommend it highly enough, Floyd. The Bliss of Being. I think he's really good. He quotes extensively from Dzogchen and Mahamudra masters and a lot from Buddhism. I think he's really good. Jackson Peterson. So he read this book. I know he did, because he suddenly wrote a couple of his blog entries about referring to this book. And I said, thank you. You may be an illusion, but I still rely. Thank you, Mother. That's, to me, is Mother all the Buddhas or Tara, whoever she is. Thank you. So he sent a couple of great things. Existential Crises and the Heart Sutra. I'm going to read it because it's really good. What would happen if you actually experienced what you call everyday life as just being a dream, a projection of the mind? I don't mean philosophically contemplating how this world is like a dream, but I mean actually waking up from this life dream, the way the Buddha did. The Buddha realized that all the images, all objects, beings, colors, sounds, tastes, odors, and sensations were only subjective, mind-generated experiences. In today's language, we would call daily life mind-generated 3D holograms of mind stuff or thought, the exact mind stuff of dreams. You know, of course, that when you have dreams, exactly the same part of your brain are activated as in real life. So what's the difference? You say, well, now I'm awake. I know I'm awake. But you're in a dream, you're not aware that you're in a dream. What's the difference? Really? What's the difference? He goes on. He was quite unique in emphasizing that the nature of a personal self in daily life is no more real than the one you experienced in the dream at night. It too was just a projection of thought or of mind stuff. Realizing that the experience of believing an objectively existing external universe was real by seeing all perceptual experiences only occurred in the mind as thought constructs, was realizing the empty nature of the objective side in reality. I'll recite that so I'm clear. The Buddha, realizing that the experience of believing an objectively existing external universe was real, and by seeing all perceptual experiences, they only occurred in the mind as thought constructs. The Buddha was realizing the empty nature of the objective side of reality. That's what I was doing with the cups. I was deconstructing external reality. Realizing that his sense of I or me as personal and subjective selfhood was also just an unreal mental construct. He was realizing the empty nature of individual selfhood, the subjective side of reality, subjective and objective, no self, no other. Empty of self, empty of other. I think that's Pransika Subbu. Previously, he held that the fictitious beliefs that both the objective outer world and the subjective individual self and its stories were real. It was discovered, however, that the true nature of consciousness was of a different hierarchy of existence. It was beyond dreams. It was beyond inherently existing subjects and objects. It was beyond all your thoughts and even samsara. That dimension couldn't be framed within the software language of the samsaric mind of thoughts and concepts. I don't get it. What are you talking about? It can't be framed within that part of the mind that talks. When asked about this dimension, he remained silent, as words only represented more misleading fictional thought constructs. By the way, you guys, by thoughts, I also mean feelings and emotions. Like, I get it. I really feel what you're talking about. No, that's a conceptual notion. Oh, well, then what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to do nothing. Drop it. Drop it. Drop. Oh, I get it now. Drop it. Drop that too, and drop that. What am I supposed to do? Nothing. I don't get it. Stop that. This is really difficult. Liberation is hard. I'm going to read a little bit more. I've still got 10 minutes. I am so familiar. We're just like an animal that's roaming around in its cage, and you open up the door to the cage, and the animal is so used to it, it keeps walking around. You take it out of its cage, and it looks around for a cage. It can't stand the open freedom of nothing, of being empty, just existence. It can't. It's scared. We are that animal. We get scared by the purity of this, the freedom of it. Back to Jackson. In later teachings, Buddha's realization was described as realizing the twofold emptiness, emptiness of self and emptiness of an objecting, existing reality. Dwelling within this wisdom would be described as no mind, because mental activity would just be dreaming again. Thinking is daydreaming, any thinking. When the mind is thinking, it loses its fully awake state, because all thinking presupposes the real existence of fictional subjects and real objects as predicates of those thoughts. In other words, but that always assumes that there's something real reified in your experience. When you finally realize that there's nothing there but emanations upon emanations on emanations, there's nothing to think about. You are actually thinking, but it's just one more, you're aware that it's just dreaming. Frankly, you guys, you know, we all think different things based on our karma and our predispositions. The interesting thing is then we begin to fight about it. Are you aware of that? I like you because your thoughts agree with my thoughts. AKA, you didn't get it. The only thing that you're seeing out there is yourself. There isn't anything other than the self. But I'm editorializing. I can go back to this. It is taught from the earliest records that students of the Buddhist emptiness teachings often suffered mental breakdowns or heart attacks when they first heard these teachings. There really couldn't be much worse news for the egoistic mind to hear. If you're feeling uncomfortable contemplating these teachings, that's a good sign, for the truth is dawning. After going through the darkest and most destabilizing moments entailed in realizing the non-existence of self and of objective reality completely, the compassionate light, joy, and wisdoms of transcendent Buddha mind begin to shine as true consciousness spontaneously. 6 or 8 minutes. You guys are so patient. Thank you. I'm going to give you a quick analogy. It isn't perfect, but it's great. Have you ever been watching an incredible sunset and you've got somebody standing next to you going, this is just amazing. This is just like this one I saw in Maine 2 years ago. This is so, look at those wonderful colors. And you just want to say, would you just shut the f up? Or you're making love and you're talking to yourself. Gee, I hope this is going well. It's like you just say, would you just shut up? That's what it's like living with a samsaric mind. You see something that's like you see a little baby and you're just crying. Oh, I love the little baby. So it's so cute. People would say, you know, I heard that they get diphtheria. It's just, what? What are you talking about? That's a samsaric mind. We're talking about opening up, dropping all of the gook and just saying, wow, wow. It's like I remember being on dope. Whoa, you know, this is amazing. It's like looking at a cup or something. It's amazing. It is all amazing. Experience is amazing. So let me read you. I'm coming close to the end here for today. Another from Carl Brunholz wrote in his book, The Heart Sutra. He says, The place where emptiness hits its own ground, or rather its own groundlessness, is called the emptiness of emptiness. When we deal with emptiness, there's still the danger or the tendency to solidify that emptiness itself. Though it is meant as the final antidote for clinging or solidifying, our mind still tries to solidify even the very lack of solidity, since it's just such an old habit of ours. This is why the Buddha taught that the emptiness of emptiness, meaning that when we need to let go of whatever understanding of emptiness we may have, since that too is not the real thing, we need to let go of any sense of insight or realization or wisdom, any sense of I got it, because that still involves duality, solidification, and reference points. Emptiness means that there is nothing to solidify, nothing to hold on to. It defeats the purpose if we mistake emptiness into some kinds of principle, universal law, or higher truth, because then we're still holding on to something. It might be slightly better, but it could also be a whole lot worse if we hold on to emptiness, because that usually means that we have missed out on the compassion part. We might just think, oh yes, everything's empty, nothing really matters. However, that's not an understanding of emptiness at all. It just means we're stuck in non-existence and nihilism. Emptiness means having an open heart, a heart of wisdom. Everything is yours. Everything is personal. Everything is baby. Everything's the flower. Everything's the dog licking your face. The whole universe, every second, is emptiness. So this is Jackson's version of the Heart Sutra. We're going to finish up with that. This is, he published this on the internet. This is his translation of the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra. Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva was moving in the deep course of wisdom, which has gone beyond. He looked down from on high and he saw but 5 skandhas, the body-mind, which in their own being were empty. They were seen as just mental constructs. Here, O Shariputra, form is emptiness, but emptiness is form. Form doesn't differ from emptiness. Emptiness also doesn't differ from form. Whatever is empty, that's form. And whatever form, that is empty. The same is true of feelings and perceptions, impulses, and dualistic consciousness. All of that is just mental constructs. O Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They have no beginning and they have no end. They're neither imperfect nor perfect, neither deficient nor complete. They're just seen as mental constructs. Therefore, O Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no name, no concept. There are no knowledge. There's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body. There's no mind. There's no forms. There's no sounds. There's no smells or tastes, no touchables, and no ignorance, or even the extinction of ignorance. There's no decay and death. There's no extinction of decay and death. All are seen to be merely mental constructs. There's no suffering. There's no origination. There's no stopping. There's no path. There's no cognition. There's no obtainment. There's nothing to obtain. All is seen as mental constructs. There's nothing to accomplish. And so the bodhisattvas can rely on the perfection of wisdom without trouble. Being without trouble, they're not the least bit afraid. They've overcome anything upsetting. They obtain nirvana. All Buddhas who appear in the 3 periods fully awake to the utmost right and perfect enlightenment because they relied on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, one should know the perfection of wisdom is the great mantra. It's the unequaled mantra. It's the destroyer of suffering by seeing all phenomena as just being mental constructs. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhiswaha. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhiswaha. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhiswaha. Bodhisattva. English, gone, 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 utterly beyond. Gone, 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 beyond gone, utterly beyond. Gone, 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 utterly beyond. Oh, what an awakening. So, 7 o'clock, late for you guys, I know. I am so grateful that I'm looking at you guys and you haven't toned out yet. Please, for the sake of the entire, all sentient beings, please tune in next time so we can continue. I'm going to go through the Prajnaparamita Sutra line by line and give you some of the nuances and background of what they're referring to in the deconstruction of reality, which is going on. It's incredible sutra. It is the Bible. It is the foundation of realization. Very important. So please come back next week. And again, I'm very grateful you all came. And we don't have time for comments, although I'm going to unmute all. All right. If we have quick comments, if you want any objections, corrections, or just whatever you need to say, send me an email, I'll answer, or if appropriate, and I will forward it to everybody else.
Jeff, is it 8:30 Eastern time next week?
Yeah, what do you guys want to do? I'm willing to go the correct time that I promised. In other words, I made you guys start an hour later. I'm perfectly willing. I will start at 4:30 next time.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's better.
Yes,
that's
better.
better a little bit.
Yeah.
My samsara.
That's good.
All right.
Okay.
That was a beautiful rendition of the Heart Sutra that you read at the end, and and the reading of it as well. I feel a little bit like what you were saying about making fun of people who are standing next to watching the sun and saying, "Oh, look at that sunlight." Well, that's kind of how I feel about when you were reading that. It was like it was really incredible, but here I am, saying that. Thank you. That was fantastic.
One of my biggest insight from Eckhart Tolle, the guy who wrote the book, what was he called? I forgot the name of his famous book.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
He had his enlightenment experience because he was talking to himself. And he started thinking, who is talking to who? Wait a minute. What? I'm talking to myself? And that was his revelation. Yeah. Everybody, we're talking to us, or actually we're just talking to ourselves because we're just projecting what they think they're saying.
Jeff, what is the name of that book by Peterson?
Oh, The Bliss of Being. I think he's really good. And he also has an amazing blog on Dzogchen and Mahamudra teachings. He's amazing.
Thank you.
Jeff, you have an interesting way of pronouncing some things. Like,
I know I do. Butcher.
Nagarjuna, you say?
I say Nagarjuna. What do you say? Nagarjuna?
Nagarjuna.
What is it, Susan? Which way does it go? Tenzin.
Tomato or tomato?
Yeah.
Right. I've heard it either way. Right.
Oh,
Both
okay.
ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's what can we say? It's samsara.
That's right.
It's so beautiful to be on here with you all. I'm so grateful because I'm not in Philadelphia, but maybe and you're not. So it's really a joy.
Good to see you again, Susan.
Wonderful to see you. Yes, thank you so much, Jeff. Wonderful teaching.
All right, show up next week. And again, these will end up online. So if you bring a couple of more folks, just have them, I don't know what to do, try to see it. I guess we can add people second time, but it's going to be very hard to understand the second part without hearing the first.
It's true.
Okay, beloveds.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right,
Good night.
Thank you.
See you next week. Thanks, Jeff.